Let's talk about Goodnight Mommy, which is an American remake of the 2014 Austrian version that Connor and Kofi covered on our channel previously. There is going to be some spoilers ahead. I also should say that I deliberately haven't watched the original, as I wanted to go into this objectively and without any preconceived opinions of it. I will, however, go and watch Connor and Kofi's review of the first one so that I can compare their thoughts to my own at the end of this video too. So let me cover what happens in the film before breaking down my thoughts and feelings. I'm not going to cover every single intricate detail, and I might even miss some stuff or get it wrong because I'm human. But either way, the film starts with a dad filming their mum with the kids in what is clearly a very loving home, but we're soon met with the polar opposite, where the dad is travelling home with the boys without the mum, while some ominous music plays, along with the kids drawing a picture of their sad family and a note saying that they really missed the mum. Something clearly happened between the mum and dad, as the dad tells the boys that their mum doesn't even want to see him right now, but they should just go in the home to greet her, which is a fantastic home, by the way. The mum is played by Naomi Watts, who's the main character in the American remake of The Ring. It's like she's just the go-to person for American remakes of foreign horrors. Don't worry though, you don't need to get your knickers in the twist about it, because it's not like it's a remake of a mermaid film or anything. When they go into the home, they can't find her initially, so they start searching the house. Eventually they do find her in the bedroom in full surgical bandages wrapped around her face and head. The boys are visibly shaken by her, and she tells them she needed a fresh start, like when you take your car to a garage and it just needed a little tune-up. Honestly though, I'm not totally sure that having your entire face rearranged by a surgeon is like tuning your car on the basis of it being your face, but whatever gets her through, I guess. There's going to be some new rules in the house. No visitors, no shouting, no running, the blinds always must be closed, and that her bedroom and office are strictly off limits. Us, the beautiful audience, are already given the feeling that these boys aren't overly familiar with this woman, and one of the boys here is way less convinced than the other one. I immediately can feel a divide between the boys, with one being super suspicious and one being more caring and loving. While the boys are playing in the field, clearly a bit bored, one of them actually goes to climb into the barn, and the mum just appears out of nowhere, aggressively grabs the boy and throws him onto the floor, cutting his arm open. She warns him that she set the rules before, and now he's just going to be confined to the house for his error. By this point, the mum started to be presented as a bit of a psycho and untrustworthy, whilst the boys are presented as vulnerable victims. Upon getting up to explore, the boys hear the mum on the phone, and she's asking whoever's on the other side how long she has to keep pretending for. They plant a walkie-talkie in her room. The mum wakes up while they're doing this though, and makes the slowest walk up the stairs that you've ever witnessed, nearly catching the boys before one pulls the old hide and seek in the wardrobe trick, whilst watching their mum admire herself as she dances erotically in the mirror. The other brother hides under the sink while she smokes and removes her mask. They deduce though from this that she can't be their mother. Their mother hated smoking, and notice some other inconsistencies, like her eye colour has changed from green to blue, and probably the biggest giveaway, she fucking hates the kids. To find out for sure if this is actually their mother or some other Coraline other mother imposter thing, one of them creeps on her while she's in the bath and tries to remove her face pack. She obviously grabs him and he smashes her in the head with something, maybe a rubber duck or something sitting about, and then he just legs it, and she obviously comes after him with a fucking crowbar. Well, that ramped up quickly, didn't it? After smacking one of the boys round the chops for gobbing off at her and saying she isn't their mum, she drags him to the bathroom and, well, she gives him a shower, and she just kind of washes him until he says she is their mother. It's not really the punishment I expected, seeing as she just went all here's Johnny on them, but maybe he's a grubby kid and she's actually just doing him a favour. At this point, things get a bit weird. The mum peels off all her skin and she looks like the most frostbitten person you've ever seen in your life. Wasn't really expecting that. I thought this was going to go down the Us route, where she'd been replaced by someone else or an alien film for some obscure reason, and we'll find out about it later. The kids are found asleep in a barn by the finest couple of police officers that good old US of A have to offer, who proceed to drive the kids back to their mum's house, even though they're begging not to be taken there, and are, of course, shitting themselves. Here you go, here's your kids back that are proper scared of you. But by this point, they've fully decided she's not their mum. So the boys drug her with her own medicine, putting it into her wine so she passes out, and then they tie her to the bed so she can't move. I imagine for one of the brothers this was for safety, but for the other little filthy bastard one, he probably had some other ideas. Luckily, his non-touchy brother keeps him sane, and they just start waterboarding her instead. She won't cave and tell them the truth though. The mum breaks down crying, and actually the boys seem to have some level of empathy for her. To be sure though that they haven't got it totally wrong, they go to find her purse, which she tells them has her coloured contact lenses in that she uses for work. Lucas finds the bag and says they're not in there, so they end up gagging her and taping her mouth shut while the kid pulls some overly dramatic facial expressions. The police come back, presumably to complete their dutiful service of getting selfies with potentially murderous, skin-peeling, now kidnapped and I have no idea what she weird person that they're fans of. The kids blag the police that the mum isn't there and they leave again saying they'll come back later in the day. Great policing if you ask me. One of these absolute fucking runts goes back in the house to get his toothbrush but finds the contact lenses she said would be there, even though Lucas said they weren't there to begin with. So it turns out Lucas is the fucking nutter and they almost immediately start scrapping each other. Elias 10-toes it upstairs and lets the mum free while Lucas is locked out the room. The mum at this point seems almost emotionless and just asks him now to go with him somewhere and leads him out of the house towards the barn. And here comes the big twist that I absolutely did not see coming. It turns out that that gunshot that woke the boys up in the middle of the night, well, the boys were playing with a gun and Lucas accidentally got shot in the face by his brother and died. Turns out Elias had repressed these memories and he's seeing his brother as almost an imaginary friend beyond that point. Unable to mentally handle the truth or the reality of the situation his mum is now presenting him with, he pushes her and she falls from the top of the barn to the floor below, presumably dying on impact, but also setting the barn on fire with a torch that has just been smashed. The barn of course goes up really quickly because it's filled with hay and the boy has no choice but to leave his mum there while her corpse just burns with the barn in a huge inferno. The film ultimately concludes with him in the field, the barn burning to the ground behind him while his mum and his brother appear, now obviously both in his imagination, and they tell him that he didn't do anything wrong and applaud him for how strong he is. His mum embraces him while he just cries and the film concludes. So at this point I went back and watched Connor and Kofi's review of the previous version. The boys torture her for a long time by methods like putting giant cockroaches on her so it crawls into her mouth, or burning her face using a magnifying glass and pouring super glue over her mouth and then cutting it back open when it's dry. The climax of the film is them burning the mum alive and burning the house down before we get the same twist at the end. Now fair play to Connor here, he did pick up those subtle hints that Lucas wasn't really there and had died previously, which I certainly didn't catch on my watch of this remake. But I do think if I went back for a second or third watch, I'd definitely now notice everything and it would seem pretty obvious. That being said, I'm not sure I'd want to go back for that watch. The film itself isn't bad and it certainly sent me in a few different directions before the twist at the end that I genuinely didn't see coming. But I struggled a little bit in parts because it felt like things weren't overly explained, or it was expected of me as the viewer to just piece it all together at random intervals throughout. But it felt like they banged a load of ideas in there with very little continuity and expected me just to accept those things that were happening without asking any questions as to why. For example, why have the mum and dad fallen out to the point they can't even say hello to each other while he's dropping the kids off? Is it because of her extensive surgery and wanting to live this new life, or is it because of the accident which drove a wedge between them? I really don't know. Another example is where the boys try and call the dad and he doesn't answer, but then 2 minutes later the mum flies into the room to snatch the phone because she's aware they've been trying to reach the dad and tell him lies about her. But how would she know that? Especially if the mum and dad don't talk and the dad didn't pick up his phone anyway. The dream sequences, for example, were totally random and not really explained as to why he saw his mum like that. At first I didn't even realise they were dream sequences. I thought we were just transitioning into some alien film until it just moved beyond them entirely and we never saw them again. Another would be why, if he accidentally shot his brother, is there multiple other scenes where he's carrying around a little gun with him, either just walking around with it or literally shooting at the fruit and veg and exploding them in the garden. I'm pretty sure that if your kid just killed your other kid with a gun, any guns, both real and fake, would probably be abolished from your home at this point, not left to just continue to play with them at will. And also, why the fuck is this child not receiving some form of counselling? Systemically, he's been totally failed here, massively. Overall, I think this is probably actually worth a watch, once. And if I did pick it back up, it would only be an attempt to join those dots that I didn't feel were connected too well in the first pass. But what did you lot reckon? And what did your imaginary family think? Did you all enjoy it? Or did it make you want to blow your brother's brains out in a barn and burn it to the ground as well? Let me know in the comments below. Please do hit that subscribe button because it helps us out a lot. And until next time, good night mummy, sweet ghouly filled dreams.